Welcome back to another episode of FinCrime&Me. To keep my channel growing and continuing to bring amazing guests, please press the subscribe button now. And I never knew that I would be doing this, especially with my background in financial crime, and to have this platform to build my networking circle as well as professional circle, but to also bring that to all of you. I appreciate the support. And today I have a very exciting guest. This is someone, and he does a job which a lot of us wonder about, especially in the fin crime sector. We tend to see the prosecution side, but his story is extremely amazing. It's insightful. It shows passion, but also extremely different to what I deal with in my day-to-day. Today, on this podcast, we have Neel Chakrabarti, and he is an ex-Met police officer, a criminal defense lawyer, a founder, strategic director, and a CEO. Neel, welcome to the show today.
Pleasure to be here.
I am so happy to have you on. And like I said, I have never had this opportunity to speak to a criminal defense lawyer, to understand them outside of work, and also to understand what motivates them, how they choose their cases, how you actually went from being ex-Met into being a criminal defense lawyer, and also doing all these other positions. I mean, what can't you do? And let us know about your journey. I think that's the best way to start.
Okay, so my journey started, I'll go around the university period. So I initially did philosophy as a BA, but with a view to doing something more relevant. And at the time, there was a lot of TV series and shows on profiling, behavioral analysis, that type of thing. So that was what I wanted to get into. So following my BA in philosophy, I went to UCL to do crime science, which is like forensic psychology, but just basically all types of the new scientific developments that assist in understanding crime. So I did that, and that introduced me to certain ways of thinking and a lot about what the landscape was like at the time, because they had a lot of people that would come in that were doing the job and telling us about real life cases. And so that got me quite excited about that. After that, I then applied for a number of different things. I applied to be an officer in the Army, the RAF and the Marines, and also police. And I got into all of them, and then I decided to do police because at the time when I was doing my master's, the 7/7 attacks happened, and it happened right by my university. So it was, and a lot of people that were working on that spoke about it. Yeah. So I then wanted to go into the police to do counterterrorism, and I thought I'd be a good type of person to fit in that. So I went into the police initially as a response team, so I'd be responding to 999 calls, so kind of the uniform stuff. But you have to do that to go into other specialist departments. It's changed now, but at the time you had to. Yeah. So I did the response team, which I didn't like as much because it's done by a sort of hierarchy, and driving is the key skill, really. And so you're effectively pushed towards being a driver. And also you're not really doing the type of work that I joined for. So eventually I went into intelligence. I went into the intelligence unit in Camden. And there was where I really found my feet, because I was doing something that at the time hadn't really been explored. So we were looking at like rap videos on YouTube and decoding the lyrics to find missing pieces of evidence. And also my task was to track people that were wanted for serious gang violence or organised crime, but predominantly gang violence. And my method was essentially, hypothetically, there would be profiles on Facebook that they would end up speaking to and giving me disclosing information that wouldn't help them. Yeah. And so that resulted in a number of arrests. And one story I can tell you is that one particular individual who there was engagement with, correspondence with, asked for this person he thought was talking to come to his house, by telling me what the address was.
Oh, wow.
And so the police went round to that address.
Yeah.
And then somehow he messaged the phone saying, don't come, feds are here. And then he somehow managed to escape through the garden. And there was a full chase on that was actually in the news, and he was still messaging me, and he got away on that occasion. But he carried on speaking and told me where he was at his grandmother's house or something like that. So I found out where that was, sent armed police round this time, because he was actually wanted for stabbing 2 police officers who turned up at some crime he was involved in. And so he was quite sought after. So they went in, they got him and another person who was wanted as well. A lot of money, a lot of drugs, all sorts of stuff. So the job was essentially done. But then I saw on his social media that he stated that he needed more credit on his phone. And so I was thinking, well, I thought he was arrested. And so we found out that he'd smuggled a phone inside him.
Into prison, yeah.
Yeah, so they got that. So that was what I really enjoyed in the police. But the police has been, it is a difficult place to work. So especially when you want to go into certain departments, and there's a lot of bureaucracy and not much budget. So I pivoted towards law, and I studied law, and I went into criminal law, and I was at a really good firm, still with them now, Duncan Lewis, and I started representing a lot of people, including some people who had actually arrested before. Yeah, which is a difficult line to cross because they don't always trust you, but it's really how you deal with people. Yeah. And so I was doing that for a while, and then I met this guy through some friends that we have who runs a private intelligence agency in New York. And he said, do you want to do some work with me because you've got a background in investigation and we're dealing with really interesting stuff. The main line of work was asset recovery. So people would steal a bunch of money, run off to another country, and it would fall between the crevices of different legal systems. Yeah. And there might be legal protection. So it's quite a complex thing to resolve. So I was working in there on those, but other investigations as well. But it was quite a big intelligence agency. So they had the former deputy director of counterterrorism for the CIA, former head of New Jersey FBI, a number of really high-profile intel people from all around the world. But I'd made it to head of operations. So a lot of them would be under me because they would have retired or left their job. And the transition from public sector to private sector, you need some guidance because it's quite a different world. So I felt quite privileged to be in a situation where I'm learning from people that had done everything, but also having that respect of telling them, you know, this is how we do this, this is how we do this, that you did like this before. And so I gained a really good network. But what I was finding was that a lot of the cases we'd have, which would be international in scope, we would be clashing with law firms and crisis comms teams, other investigation firms, PR teams, cybersecurity, and it would be a big fight over who should take pole position in this case. And everyone's essentially selling themselves, but not aligning it to the client's needs. So during the pandemic, I broke away from the company I was at and started my own law firm, my own intelligence agency and security firm, because I thought they're the 3 prongs that are key to every investigation. We've also got a crisis comms team, but it's kind of absorbed in it. And so then I realized we could provide clients exactly what they need depending on the problem, rather than trying to give them whatever we have. So if it's a legal matter, then we have a law firm to deal with that. But if the damage is being done in the public, then we need to deal with it from a PR standpoint. Okay, so because they could be very well-known people and their share prices are tanking or they're losing sponsor, whatever it is. But also the public narrative builds momentum for the prosecutors. So that might be the right approach. Or it might be just intelligence, just gathering information. So it depends on what the problem is. And so then I started that. And because I built such a good network before, that's kind of what I've been doing since then. Additionally to that, when I was in the intelligence agency in the US, they were heavily involved in human trafficking investigations. And so they introduced me to quite a elite group of people that are emboldened to mobilize against human trafficking. And so I became really interested in that. We're going back like 10, 15 years because I'd had experience in the police already, but it was a very different reactive approach.
Yeah.
But then I started conducting human trafficking investigations and going to numerous countries, India, Hong Kong, China, the UK, America, loads of different countries that supported human trafficking investigations or worked with charities. And I carried that on because I was quite heavily involved in it, and I'd given a number of talks at the Vatican, at West Houses of Parliament, and I was quite knowledgeable at the intricacies of human trafficking and how to investigate it. Yeah. And so then I started doing that in my own company and supporting charities, and we went to Ukraine last year through Moldova for a rescue operation. So we've done quite a lot of work in the human trafficking, and it's good to set off the other work I do because this one's kind of more ideological.
With your work with regards to human trafficking, is that more of a passion project aside from what you do day to day? Or does that integrate with everything that you're doing day to day?
It integrates because in my other... I handle covert investigations, or I organise them from my background in police and from what I like to do. So I can create infiltration strategies for human trafficking networks. That comes from my knowledge of these networks and from the covert investigation scene. I don't do them myself, but I have like teams that will go out and get information or infiltrate networks. So that's a big part. But also, it became a big passion project. But it was a way of demonstrating what we do without breaching a number of confidentiality clauses for other clients.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the one thing we can talk about without any issues. And also, it teaches you a lot about the world when you're focused on the worst end of it.
Yeah.
And once you kind of start doing it, then it becomes almost like an internal push rather than just cut it off. And it's helped a lot because when you do human trafficking investigations, sometimes I'll have the rare distinction of representing someone for similar offences.
Yeah.
But I'll be able to see it in a different way that will enable me to actually present defences that might not seem obvious unless you know the human trafficking ecosystem.
That's very interesting. With regards to the human trafficking side, are you then taking more of a strategic approach, and then do you disseminate that intelligence to authorities?
So we will generally always work with local authorities.
Okay.
There are some occasions when we can't. It's when they might be complicit, which is quite often. But generally we'll work with a charity or we'll get our own intelligence and then we'll decide internally whether we try to do one operation. I find one operation a year. So we'll see if that one fulfills the criteria.
It's very interesting, especially because you do criminal defense and then you're also doing this other part of human trafficking, which is, of course, helping the world as well. And most times public perception on criminal defense lawyers is that, they're just helping criminals. They're not looking at the bigger picture, and it's more about, case fees. And obviously criminals pay quite a bit to be defended and have representation and to also win a case. And that's also from shows and movies that we see. How do you feel when people compare your job to what we've all seen through movies and shows?
I think from my perspective that it's a little bit confusing because I do both the pursuit or the investigation, and I do representation. But I see it more in a couple of ways. One is I play a lot of chess, so I see it as either you play white or black. Okay. And so it's kind of not an emotional decision. But I also actually believe in that judicial process. So I think that if you believe in the judicial process, then it doesn't really matter which side you're on, and you're going to evolve the system no matter what end you're at, as long as you're good at what you do. And if the system's more robust overall, then it's a net benefit.
You started your career as an intelligence analyst with Metropolitan Police and then becoming a criminal lawyer. And of course, doing the human trafficking investigations and stuff. What helped you through these transitions, and what motivated you through these transitions?
Motivation was I read a lot, so it was connecting with why I did that in the first place and preserving that energy, that momentum to be still in that space. In terms of transition, I was very fortunate that I met some really good people that were able to guide me and assist me, because the transition from police to law is it's actually quite a big one.
It is.
Yeah, it's a very big one. And because every type of sector that I've worked in, because I worked in KPMG as well, in like anti-money laundering, and you notice a collective personality in each sector. So the police, you generally know if they're police, that their personality adapts to the work that they're exposed to, and lawyers are the same. And so the main thing was shifting from the police personality to the lawyer personality, and the different ranges of personality depending on where they are. So police officers, as they get higher, their personality changes in a personal setting as well. Yeah. And lawyers are similar. So
it's actually rare to see people go from prosecution, like working in Metropolitan Police, to then essentially jumping ship or jumping side into defence. Did you have any pushback from friends, family, colleagues when you went into being a criminal defence lawyer?
No, nobody, no. At that period, though, it's still, it's on a gradual decline, but the police didn't have the best reputation.
Not at that time.
No, not at that time, and not so much now either. And a lot of the people I'd met had a negative experience with the police. And also I wasn't progressing to where I thought I wanted to be. Yeah. So nobody said, no, everybody thought it was a good idea.
Did your work in policing help you win cases as a criminal defence lawyer? To understand how everything works internally, has that been a good advantage for you in your cases?
It's a massive advantage, because the law can teach you statutes and case law, those types of things, but it won't tell you the intricacies of the police nuances of how they conduct investigations, where the vulnerable areas are. For instance, a lot of the statements used to be very similar, and the reason for that was because they used to do them together. So those types of things you wouldn't know, but you could, but they'd be using the same terminology in each of the statements. Yeah, that's one of them. I mean, there's quite a lot of different things at the time as well. There was all the things that have been moved out now, but before there used to be a blanket search for if you smell cannabis in the air. And that's obviously not, you can't prove that.
No.
But it was always be on every stop and search slip. And we were encouraged to do that. And so you know that if you know how to investigate whether or not it's real by looking at all the other stop and search slips. Yeah. And so they're the types of, they're just two examples that have been phased out. That's why I mentioned it. But there's lots of other ones that are vulnerabilities in the manner in which police investigate things that I would be privy to, but you wouldn't unless you were actually in the police paying attention.
I agree with that. I've had so many cases where you are right. As a team, sometimes statements have been copied and statements are just copy-pasted to hurry up and get the admin out of the way. And that's the same when it comes to prosecution as well. I still remember giving, case files to CPS, and I think, especially because it is high demand and not much time to really fulfill what you want to do, you miss out on looking at a lot of intricate things that could be missed, and then that's the statement that goes to prosecution. And sometimes CPS would, of course, then say, no, we're not going to prosecute. There's not enough evidence. But there is, but sometimes there are these nuances which just doesn't get you to the finish line. And I do agree with understanding how policing works helps you also understand investigations in a whole different light. I took that knowledge into the private sector, which massively helped get some cases in front of officers, which actually sometimes are seen as too hard, or, it's not flavor of the month. And then having that insight, exactly what you need to actually sell an investigation to an officer. And I never thought that would be the case. You obviously, as when you're within public service, you kind of see it as if a victim comes forward, they've put forward a victim report of fraud, financial crime, whatever it is, the police will take it seriously until you work within the sector, and then you realize that there is a lot of politics in policing, and sometimes you're just trying to hurry up and, close a case, or just seeing whether it's worthwhile even pursuing. So that's helped me in the private sector as well with actually allocating cases, or even helping a victim say specific wording to get their case seen. So having that insight helps, and I guess it would help for your cases, but it also helps private sector in a different way, which I never thought would be a key skill, and now it is. Yeah,
for sure, and even understanding the relationship that the police have with the CPS, that's a key insight, because usually the police are overconfident and the CPS are underconfident on the same evidence. So it's understanding how the CPS would interpret what they've got and then planning for that. That's something that's difficult to understand, because people will think the police and the CPS are one. But they conflict
sometimes they're
a lot.
Battling with each other.
A lot of the time.
I remember that. Those were some of the cases where I would go back to my CPS lawyer probably 5 times a week just to say, I know we can, win this in court. We have enough evidence. But if it's a no from them, it sadly doesn't go any further. So sometimes public opinion tends to be, they're not doing anything. And I don't think the public understand some of the internal battles we have as well.
And also understanding budgets is very difficult, because there's certain crimes that might be investigated that how much budget they're going to allocate to it, so how much investigation they're going to do, and that inside information it's hard to come by, because you can almost tell this is how much they're going to put into it, and this is how much they'd need to get the evidence they need.
That's very true. Sometimes we've had some cases, and like you said, it does depend on budget, because if the loss isn't, or even when it comes to the loss and asset seizure, if it's not a specific amount, you kind of weigh out the pros and cons of how much is this going to cost going into court and stuff like that. And then it's just like, if it's costing more, is it worthwhile even investigating?
And so there's a lot of different variables at play, and it's not just always just the strength of the evidence. There's also the, so for instance, the SFO are going through a lot of changes. And so if you had an SFO case, then you wouldn't just deal with the law, you'd also deal with the organizational structure. Because you would know that going through, say, for instance, a leadership crisis or a management crisis, they are going to be a bit more risk averse. So just little things like that, they change the strategy.
It does, and it can change how cases are then taken as well.
Exactly.
Something that would have probably progressed last week, if a shuffle happens today, might not progress.
Exactly.
How did your experience in learning behavioral analysis help you in your career?
So I would say that's the foundational skill, which is why I can navigate to seemingly antithetic departments, because I'm always focusing on behavior, which is different to, I think, the majority of lawyers, because the correct response from an objective legal standpoint might be different when you subjectively look at the individual. So, for instance, an example could be in domestic type situations, if you get a non-molestation order or a restraining order, it can sometimes, based on the person's psyche, it could exacerbate, it could make them worse.
Okay.
Yeah. So you don't always want to do what might be the optimal legal response from an objective standpoint. You want to customize the legal strategy to the key individuals. So it could be the organization, even the lawyer, the witnesses. You want to understand their behavior, or their responses based on their profile. And that's been absolutely essential from asset recovery operations, when I could tell from their pattern of life where they're likely to be, what type of thing they're going to be interested in. And even from a legal standpoint, you can tell, for instance, if there's a witness who is lying about something and has something to hide, whether they're likely to give evidence at court and what they're likely to say. So behavior is the key.
I'm interrupting this episode to remind you to stay safe online. Scams are everywhere, ready to take your hard-earned money. Please ensure that you do not share your passwords, do not click on unusual or unexpected links that come through your emails, text messages, and even WhatsApp, especially when they purport to be from your bank, card company, the government, your crypto exchange, and even family and friends. If you do fall victim to a scam, please report this to your local police as soon as possible. Please also report this to your bank, your card companies, and even your crypto exchange. Please stay safe online. Thank you, and let's go back to the episode. When you say behavioral analysis, do you mean, and this is for everyone also watching at home, can you expand on what do you actually mean? Do you mean their body behavior? Do you mean their financial behavior? Do you mean their lifestyle, like you said, or is that all combined?
It's all combined, not so much non-verbal, because there's not as much literature on that, and there's a predictable method of anticipating what one behavior corresponds with. But in terms of, we're looking at more of the scientific side, rather than back in the day it was all about kind of trying to extrapolate what the offender looks like from the crime.
Yeah.
But we've moved on from that. So we're trying to understand the thought process, and then looking into what that thought process might express from a pattern of life. And we're really looking at understanding how they've lived their life, what motivates them, what they do under stress, what they do if the situation's ambiguous, how are they likely to respond to highly stressful situations, those types of things. And you can almost map it out, because people's habits harden. So whatever they did before, that's going to be their way of dealing with it now, generally, because they don't know another way to deal with it. So, so we really focus on understanding. It's really in depth. It goes into. There was a famous CIA psychologist called Gerald M. Post, who created this new way of mapping leaders, and he would do Saddam Hussein and various others. But he used a method called psychobiography, which goes all the way from your childhood, your formative periods, up to your decision-making style as you grow. And that gives you so much insight into that person, because the one thing that behavioral analysis is really good at is predicting what people will behave under stress.
Does this profiling help you choose what cases you want to take or, not take?
So in the private sector, we don't have as much leeway in what we take.
Okay.
Unless there's an ethical boundary that's being crossed. But otherwise, if people come to me, they generally come to me through a network. So they know, so they're coming to me for specific, like a specific reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, or from something they've heard about me. And that's important in that you kind of know. I'm not getting random cold calls.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. With regards to your cases, has there ever been a case that has tested you, made you a bit surprised with their behavior, for example? And was this case, were you able to see a different way of investigating or different behavioral analysis that came through that case?
There's two that comes to mind. Okay. I'll give you the first one because that's closer in my recollection. So our investigation was to recover a large sum of money from an investment that went wrong. And I flew to the Middle East to the person who lost the money, and they explained how it happened, and they said that there's a number of different frauds that have been perpetrated against him, and this was the one that was the proof of concept to see whether we can do the other ones, because he had a difficult period where everyone essentially stole what they could from him. He told me that this particular job, he'd invested with an Iranian group in Los Angeles for investment in a South American country. And so after a while, we'll say it's 5 million, the money was gone, and it was shown as a real estate scam, and he didn't know much more. So I Googled it. I found a picture of a guy in a wheelchair who was American-Iranian, and he had been convicted for not just the 5 million, but for the whole fund, like 100, 200 million, like a big amount that was stolen. And he was doing like 20 to 30 years. He was going to spend the rest of his life in prison. And so all I had was this newspaper article, and it had his lawyer's name. So I contacted his lawyer, who was a bit cagey and wouldn't give me any information, and but said he's here to help, which felt a little bit off. And then maybe a day or two later, I received a message from somebody in his office saying that he knows the person who I'm trying to get hold of, and I should speak to his wife. So I spoke to his wife, and she basically said that he'd been framed by a collusion between some Iranian gangsters and the judiciary in this South American country, and there was £1 million or dollar bribe given to the judge the day before the sentencing.
Wow. And
so he was the scapegoat for the big fraud.
Okay.
And that was the reason. So I then flew to the South American country, and as I got there, they told me that the previous lawyer that went to the prison, he was shot dead as he came out of the prison by these people on motorbikes.
Yeah.
So that wasn't information I had before to change the kind of risk calculus. So I had to then take a lot more precautions. And eventually I went to see him, and we worked together quite well. And I actually released him on that trip to house arrest. And what had happened to him was they tortured him, and they'd put him in this sea where these fish would be biting his legs as part of his, like, the torture, because they thought he knew more or something. And as a result, he was wheelchair bound. And it was quite sad to see because he was quite a strong character, and he was a doctor as well. So he was very highly educated and involved in these businesses. But that was one job where I thought, I don't know what I walked into, because there's probably some type of cartel involvement or something bad.
Yeah, especially with the drive-by shooting.
Yeah, as the lawyer left the... and it was all in the papers, but they didn't say who he was visiting.
Yeah.
So I couldn't put the two together.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was... but I've had a lot of jobs like that, which have that element of risk. But that one just felt a little bit more raw. Yeah, because they really didn't want him out because he could give evidence against the people that did it.
Do you do your own risk assessment in cases like this? So like, would you then employ security or would you not necessarily travel to these locations? How do you manage that?
So I'll do my own risk assessment, and I run a security company, so I'll take someone with me or have a network. They'll have a local person if there's firearms or laws that need to be adhered to. But a lot of it's not a perfect science because you don't have all the information available. So I'll do a risk assessment on the information, but that information is based on everybody telling the truth and knowing everything.
Okay.
So there's always some elements. We'll put in as many measures in place as possible, but there's an inherent element of risk in certain jobs.
You mentioned, with regards to everyone saying the truth, have you ever had a client that hasn't said the truth and then you've decided not to go with them?
So the first bit of advice I got from a lawyer is an Italian lawyer, and she said to me, the first rule of law is never trust the client. Yeah. And at the time I wasn't sure.
Sounds very Hollywood.
Yeah. But after a while you realise what they mean. Everybody, a lot of the time clients are hiding something. Yeah. But what tended to happen for me was if I knew the person who'd been arrested, they were more likely to lie to me for some reason. Yeah, even if I knew them really well.
Yeah.
Whereas people that I didn't know, they would be a lot more forthcoming.
They would say it honestly.
But the way that the regulations are, if somebody tells you that they admitted something or any concessions, you can't then assist them in lying. Yeah. So once they've admitted the offence, it's just mitigation and putting the burden of proof on the prosecution. So it's not a case of listening to what the client says and fabricating a defence that you know not to be true. Yeah. And there's no real incentive to do that because it's a pretty serious breach, and there's no reason to go above that. No. But generally, as I said, it's just the people that I know really well that will say, no, I wasn't nowhere near there. I promised, you know me for years. And then there'll be CCTV of him in the place who said, that's always been
because they just don't want you to change your view of them?
I don't know. It was never that great to start with. So I don't know. It would be just, I don't know, it could be self-delusion. Yeah. It could be optimism. It could be just, you're just so used to not telling the truth.
Yeah. So interesting, especially when it's someone that you know.
Know really well, lots of times.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a pattern.
Behavioural analysis, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Has there ever been a case that you were so sure you would win, but you didn't?
There was one case that I didn't win at the time, recently, because the pressure was up. I can tell you about it because it was in the papers. There's a case called Miles Kwok. He's a Chinese billionaire. There was a dissident and that fled China after having stolen several billion, at least accused of. And then he ingratiated himself with the Trump administration and was very close friends with Bannon. And he had been involved in the most amount of terrible things that I'd come across. And but the focus was on the financial side, but it was the other side that was actually more egregious. So I was one of the... when he left China, he took a Chinese girl with him, ostensibly as an employee, but she became a slave essentially.
Oh, okay.
And they came to the UK,
Yeah.
and he was involved in some serious sexual assaults against her. And but the Chinese police thought she was involved with whatever he was doing, so she kind of fell in the middle between victim and suspect because they didn't know.
Yeah.
And eventually she escaped and went to, I think, a Buddhist temple to kind of escape. And then, because she had no passport or anything, and she kind of found a way out. But then they raised it as a criminal complaint. And then the NCA, Chinese police, and he also did the same thing in New York. So the FBI were all looking at, and Intel services. So because he's in that middle ground, because I think he was Chinese Intel before. So my role was very simple. It was through human trafficking charity. I needed to get information from her that could assist the prosecution in the UK. And there's no extradition treaty, even though he's in the US. But the Chinese police and the UK police don't have a good relationship.
Right.
So I went to China, to where this girl was in witness protection, in the middle of nowhere, and interviewed her. The police let me. And during that, it was like 3 days of interviewing her. And what I found was that because the Chinese police treated her as a suspect, she was always in a state of stress.
Yeah.
And so her recollection wasn't as helpful as it could be, because she knew everything because she was always with him. And so I managed to create enough rapport with her, because her English was very good, to get key bits of information that really, because it was a serious sexual assault, but if you look at it in its entirety, it's a human trafficking offence, which is a different category because it enables you to do a lot more other things. And so by the time I've created this chronology of what happened, we had a really, really good case because it was almost indefensible. Yeah. And the NCA and the police were just not batting up. They were just batting heads. And they thought it was politically motivated because he was a Chinese dissident. And whether it was or not's irrelevant, because the offence itself has nothing to do with that. It was a clear-cut trafficking case. And that one didn't have, it was going through it for years. But then recently he's been arrested and in the US. And I think he's going to be gone for a long time.
Wow. So you got the result in the end anyway?
We got the result because I was working with the US law firms as well. So he did so many bad things. It was only a matter of time. But I wanted this particular case to be his kind of demise. Yeah.
Do you find it easier working with law enforcement abroad or regional over here?
Actually abroad.
Okay.
Yeah, actually abroad, depending on who they are. But generally, if I'm speaking to someone abroad, then we'll have some relationship and there's no real ego because I'm not trying to do what they're trying to do and they're not trying to do what I'm trying to do. So, but what I'm doing could help them and what they're doing could help me. But whereas in the UK, because I was police as well, sometimes you see people keep things more, they keep things closer to their chest than they need to because it's not going to harm them, but they're not sure. They're probably less trusting here.
I still find it, I think unless you know your point of contact, it's sometimes hard. So
it's
sometimes
hard.
Like using your point of contact when you were at Metropolitan Police, that would probably help you.
But we're going back a long way. But I've developed other contacts and stuff. But there are clear data protection rules. But what they can help you with is process. Okay, that's not confidential. So the process is an internal thing, and it changes since I've been there. So that's very helpful. But a lot of the time, in the police, if somebody's hiring me to do an investigation, it's because they were a victim of a crime and the police didn't catch them or didn't convict them. And so that becomes difficult because essentially you're saying you didn't do your job.
Which no one wants to hear.
No one wants to hear. And so a lot of the time they'll be trying to sell you why the case isn't strong. And that's an awkward conversation because you might have found evidence that they didn't have, but but they don't want to accept it because then they have another case on their file.
Yeah. You work in an extremely high stress, sometimes morally complex area. How do you manage this? Well, how do you de-stress? How do you manage your stress levels?
Well, I do a lot of, in relation to the morally complex first, I have a set of values that I refer to in order to guide me in whatever I'm doing.
Okay.
So I'm kind of principle driven. And so if it breaches a principle or a value, then that's fine, because morality can be quite complex on a spectrum, and it can be open to interpretation in certain crevices of human interaction.
Yeah.
So I try to simplify it and just use the principles and values. And in terms of stress, I do a lot of, I do love it. So I think the issue for me is when I'm not doing it. When I'm engaged, then I have something to do. There's a clear task. But I do a lot of sports. I do MMA. I do go to the gym. I try and, travel. I read a lot. I spend a lot of time with family. So I try and get I need to get a good home base, because when I leave the home, it's all a bit chaotic.
Yeah. Can you actually shut down when you are on holiday, or do you still think of cases?
So I'm not really on holiday because I'm 24/7.
Yeah.
So if there's an emergency, because my company's a crisis management firm, so it can be anything from a data breach to a kidnap.
Okay.
So if something happens when I'm on holiday, I have to deal with it, because it's usually fast moving and serious.
Yeah.
But I'm also kind of hoping something comes in, because they are exciting and interesting. Yeah. So that's the balance.
How do you describe your personal philosophy when it comes to justice, law, protecting individuals, and organizations?
Personal philosophy. So I've got a few different ones, and I draw on kind of more ancient literature to guide me. So one of the things I've found that's helped me the most is I read this book called Tao Te Ching when I was younger, and it was the story of this guy who had learned everything that he had to and was about to retire into the forest for the rest of his life. But just before he leaves, someone asks him, "Can you write down what you've learned?" And then no one ever heard from him again. And in that book, they say that there's three major tenets of life, major principles. And he says it's patience, simplicity, and compassion.
Yeah.
So I look for a problem and I think, which one of these three is out of sync? Which one of these is what's necessary? And that's always been pretty successful, because a lot of the time you're just not patient, or you've overcomplicated it, or you're too emotional. You're not, you just got negative emotion. Yeah. So that kind of helps me, because it's usually one of those three.
Yeah.
Aside from that, it's kind of trying to just help people that have had something bad happen to them. Obviously, the defense law side, I'm representing someone, because being arrested is a bad thing for them.
Yeah. How do you stay objective and not emotional in cases?
I'm desensitized to it now at this point.
Okay.
Once you've been through it so many times, you see patterns, and you also know emotion's never going to help, but not uncontrolled emotion.
Yeah.
So, it's not really an issue, because then a lot of the time the other people are super emotional because something's happened. Like people only call me when they're unhappy. Something bad's happened. So I'm getting a lot of emotion back.
Yeah.
And if I give it back as well, it's going to not be helpful.
Yeah. I always find if you go into this line of work, you do become desensitized. And I think you're right. We just see the investigation in a different way, kind of see it objectively, see it as patterns. You don't see it in an emotional ride. Even if the person in front of you is emotional, you can have compassion, but I think you can still remain objective. And I think that's a key skill.
It's also very slow. So all the emotions for everybody, they exhaust. 2 years into an investigation, everyone's developed their coping methods by then. Usually it's just blocking it, but or sometimes it could be anything. But they would have developed some adaptive coping mechanism. So it's really just getting them through the beginning bit when they're in full panic mode. So you have to be as objective and kind of positive for them as well, but also realistic.
What would you say is a key skill needed for someone who is wanting to be a criminal defense lawyer?
The criminal defense lawyer, I would probably say, is only part of my job. It's probably lesser than the investigation side. But from a criminal defense, the main thing I would say is a lot of the time lawyers can develop a personality that's hard to connect with for people that have been arrested, because it feels like you're talking down to them. So I think the best skill you can have is being able to speak to people so that they feel like you're on the same level with them, because then they'll tell you more and they'll be in they won't be in a stressful mindset. So they'll be able to remember things or anticipate things, or you'll get the best out of them. And also they'll remember you, because they'll remember how you actually made them feel when everything was terrible. Yeah,
I agree with that. I think the way someone makes you feel sticks to you more than what you might say to them. So obviously you do investigations and all of that as well. So what would be a key skill for investigations?
Investigations, I think the main one that people don't really talk about as much because of the podcasts and the TV series, it's just really slow, patient, time-consuming. And if you aren't totally focused on what you're doing all the time, you'll miss that one thing you needed. And so it's really about being consistent and patient.
Yeah, very true. It can always be the smallest nugget of information that can make or break your case. And actually give it another line of inquiry, depending on what you're looking into. So we're getting to the last segment of our episode today. So you get to choose your own question, but you'll have to choose an asset first. So do you choose crypto, cash, or commodities?
Cash.
Cash is king, right?
Cash is king, yeah.
Okay, so then your question is there any quote, book, or speech that has inspired you?
Yes. There's been a few books, because I read quite a lot. Tao Te Ching, as I mentioned, but that's more of an operating system. Then I read As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. A lot of these books are more about controlling your emotions, developing critical thinking, and just how to think. Because once you know how to think, then you can apply it to whatever you want to do. So those two books I would definitely recommend. And then I don't know. I think those ones are quite a heavy read. The other books are by Nicholas Nassim Taleb. He's got 3 books: Anti-Fragile, Black Swan. I'm blanking on the other one, but they're the brilliant books. But again, they're to help you think, and then you can choose what to do with that higher form of thinking.
You do read a lot of books, Neel. I am going to pass you my little book so that you can write a question for the next guest. But I think my audience would probably love to have a list of books from you, if that's possible, if you can send it after. I'm sure a lot of people would love that.
Thank you.
Would you ever write a book, Neel?
Yes, I will do. Once I finish doing all this stuff, I can document it.
Yeah. I think that'll be very interesting. You are a very interesting person, Neel. Extremely complex, and you do everything. I've never met someone that does everything, and And I think
I don't do everything. The companies do everything.
Yeah.
But I know enough about enough.
Yeah.
I know enough about a lot of things to know who the right people are, and also what tools needed in an investigation. So, you know, you might be, because if you just do traditional investigation, sometimes you won't be aware of a shortcut. So I'll know the shortcut, and then the person that will be able to implement it.
Okay.
Do you want me to write a question for the next person?
A question for the next person. Thank you.
Okay. And you don't want me to tell you?
Don't tell me.
Okay.
No. That's for the next guest to find out on the show. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I also expect some comments in this episode. Please let me know what you enjoyed and what you've learnt, whether you do want the list of books, whether you'll also be grabbing the book that Neel has mentioned. And don't forget to press the subscribe button, and I will see you on the next episode. Leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Leave a comment and let me know what else you want me to discuss. And subscribe to stay tuned for more.